Hey, everybody. Fascinating chat today as we dive into the world of positioning, navigation, and timing with Spirent, a true leader and innovator in the space. Adam, how are you?
Very good, thanks. And how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining. Really intrigued by
Pleasure.
the mission and the work you're doing in this area at Spirent. Really important work. Before that, maybe introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, role, and the mission at Spirent.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Evan. My name's Adam Price. Been with Spirent for about 10 years now. I'm responsible for the PNT simulation business, pretty much covering all of our thought leadership in terms of next generation products, business development, who are engaging all of our key customer groups, and elements of our operations here as well at Spirent. My group's based in the UK. UK is a multinational company, but the group here in the UK is focused on our PNT business and the simulation portfolio within that. So, yeah, thanks. Hopefully that gives you a bit of background about where I'm coming from.
It does indeed. And maybe talk about your solution set and the portfolio and how it fits within the PNT environment and some of the problems that you're solving, particularly around PNTX, your newer platform.
Yeah, so we're really proud of PNTX. Product was launched earlier this year. It's our sixth generation simulator. So what we're passionate about is being able to simulate PNT environments, PNT position, navigation, and timing. We've been in this application space for many years and become strong market leaders there. Strongly from I would say, a satellite navigation background, GNSS. But what we've really started to embrace now is how PNT in general is becoming more rich and more complex. And our latest generation of simulator is really to address that as PNT starts to embrace new signals, gets utilized in new environments. We need to simulate that. And that's something that our new PNTX solution is addressing. And it's going to help our customers in the years moving forward to take PNT systems to the next level.
Fantastic. Well, let's set the scene here because there's a lot of buzz around alternatives to the global navigation satellite systems networks today. So lots happening in the PNT space, but I don't read much more than the headlines there. So,
Yeah.
What are some of the main themes and how does PNTX help finding alternative additional data sources? What are some of the drivers there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we should probably acknowledge that GNSS based PNT it is a cornerstone, and although it's been around a long time, it's really continued to evolve and progress. And I'm just amazed how new improvements keep coming in the GNSS part of PNT. It's absolutely unbelievable the amount of new capabilities that are coming through there.
Mm.
I think we do have to acknowledge, though, that there is a vulnerability to it. I think there's a lot of press around that, and both technologists and industrialists have obviously started to look at complementary and alternative ways of providing PNT. So again, as we've evolved here at Spirent, we've had to embrace that and moving from just that GNSS simulation solution to start utilizing some of these newer alternatives. So if I would call out some of those, I think certainly the low Earth orbit option has continued to evolve. For a number of years, we have had a low Earth orbit capability. Our current generation has really accelerated that. We want to be able to provide the most modular, flexible, low Earth orbit simulation PNT capability there is on the market. Because the challenge with, I'll call it LEO rather than still keep saying low Earth orbit. The challenge with LEO is, unlike GNSS, is there's very little standardization. There's new players coming through. They have proprietary ways of doing what they do, offering different services and use cases. And then for us to be a simulator within that application, we have to be flexible and modular to do that. So LEO has started to offer some good evidence of alternative and complementary PNT. We can take a look at some players like Zona, for example. We've been quite public about working on a simulation capability there. That's one clear example of what we've had to do with PNTX to be able to provide a really good solution for that type of signal. And I'm sure there will be other alternatives coming through. We have to bear in mind with LEO that a lot of the LEO initiative started from the communication side, not the PNT side. So there's a lot of infrastructure now building in space, which has been initially designed for comms, and we're working with people now to see, well, could you utilize some of that for PNT? And that actually then means that from a simulation capability, we've had to put in more flexibility, more capability into our simulators to be able to offer that to customers. So I think LEO is very real now. And then there are the others. So we have certainly for location awareness, we start talking around LiDAR and radar and terrestrial-based signals. Now, what we've done with PNT is PNTX, is that we have set ourselves on a journey to make sure that the architecture of the system is as modular and flexible as possible. So we can now integrate with ease with other types of simulators. So say if there's somebody that does have a LiDAR simulator or somebody that does have a radar simulator, rather than do everything in PNTX, we want to make sure that PNTX can fuse and integrate and be able to work with these other alternative PNT sources or simulators to give you that complete portfolio of PNT signals. But it's a rapidly changing environment, a rapidly changing world. We have to be ahead of this in Spirent, and that is what PNTX has the ambition to do.
Fantastic. You mentioned there, caught my attention, threats to GNSS. Of course, you read about that all the time, but how serious are those threats? Who might be affected? Give us some insight there.
Yeah, I think, there's a petitioning of these threats. Excuse me. I think, obviously, when we look at GNSS, it remains to be a relatively weak signal from space, and there are, firstly, there's natural phenomenon that could occur that can create interference to GNSS PNT types of signal. So anything that comes in band of GNSS, we are helping customers help to put mitigation algorithms in place in their PNT systems to be able to deal with that. I think as you move beyond the natural types of interference, the next one would be obviously intentional jamming. So I think if we bear in mind that our business has a strong and long pedigree in defense and space segments, where one thing in the defense market is that in PNT areas, jamming is used. It's part of a nav war capability. So taking from what we know in terms of how intentional jamming can interrupt GNSS, we can provide a really credible simulation capability into our simulators to allow our customers to work out how to deal with those types of jamming signal. Why I reference the pedigree is that we feel that's really important when addressing the commercial markets, because I think the commercial markets have been slightly later to pick up on intentional jamming. I think there's a lot of press and building knowledge of it now, but it's certainly behind the defence market from having an anti-jam capability. Well, if we can take our knowledge of what we know about how to mitigate jamming from our pedigree and be able to help our customers in the commercial world understand that and build that resilience in, that's a really strong kind of relationship that we can build with them to help them work through that. And then the third area I'd say is spoofing. So another clear PNT threat. Now, spoofing is a bit more difficult to do, certainly in the commercial world, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. Again, it has been an occurrence in the military defense markets. So again, we can help our commercial customers with our knowledge around spoofing and how to protect against it by embedding spoofing capabilities in our simulator, where it can be done in a nice, safe and controlled environment where our customers then can test countermeasures to it. And
wow,
you only have to look again in the press about spoofing. If you look at a lot of press around the aviation space at the moment, because unfortunately we're in a time where spoofing is being launched deliberately by various nations, and that does have an effect on our commercial industries. So spoofing is very real, and the receivers that are going into those types of industries in the commercial segments need to be able to mitigate that. As a minimum, be able to detect it and know when spoofing is occurring. So, jamming, interference, spoofing, they remain to be key threats to certainly GNSS based PNT, which we want to continue helping our customers mitigate. Some of the benefits of LEO come through to help mitigate as well, much stronger signal. There are other challenges with LEO, but if you can then start complementing GNSS with LEO-based signals or ground-based signals, you've then got that fusion to be able to make more informed decisions around jamming and spoofing threats to your PNT system.
Wow, really important work. And it sounds like PNTX can make systems, countries, people more secure today. Yeah. I mean, these are capabilities you can offer customers as we speak. Yeah.
Very, very true. I think one of the challenges that we see in the commercial world is being able to really model things like jamming and spoofing credibly. Because if you think about things like the handset industry, well, how do I effectively model that I'm being spoofed or jammed in a downtown urban environment in a credible way? Yeah, you can simulate a jamming signal mixed in with a PNT signal to a handset that's under test, but how do you make it real? And that's one of the challenges and pushbacks we've had historically with our customers. So we've addressed that. So if I say, well, how are we helping people, industry, countries? If I take that handset example, well, we can now actually model a city from a 3D model and go from something that is statistically representative to something that is much more real, with actual building models in there from real life. So we could take a specific street in a specific city at a specific time of day with specific PNT signals, and then move set, for example, a example handset on a journey through that city, and we could simulate how resilient it would be to those types of threats that I've just talked about. So working with the handset providers, the chipset providers that are actually putting those types of devices into the field for user consumption, we can make a real difference there, because what we're doing is helping them to build resilience in to those chipsets and handsets from day one. And many of those chipsets, for example, are then used in other industries downstream. So if we can address that with realism in the commercial world, I think we could really take PNT resilience forward with PNT X. At the country level, I would say we're moving more then to critical national infrastructure and maybe defense markets again. There are really complex systems in place in PNT today that have built-in jamming resilience and spoofing resilience. Some really credible systems. And there are also some credible ones, I should say, in the commercial world as well. So the challenge is that even though those systems exist today in the defense markets, the threat to them continues to grow. The complexity of the threat, the amount of signals that can be there as threats continue to grow, and it's making these systems more and more complex. Again, with PNT X, we have the ability to model those systems and the signals that they are being presented with to help those nation states improve the resiliency of those systems, even albeit complex. We can really help them to move those systems forward with really complex scenarios in really complex environments by introducing more signals, more realism into the environment to help them move their development forward. And that's something that we do feel really, really proud about, and we want to continue our market leadership position on.
Well done. And it sounds like as PNT moves into new areas, as you describe, including space, all kinds of new projects and proof of concepts are possible. Yeah. What else are you seeing customers asking for?
Yeah, I think I probably, LEO is just worth there for reference again. Clearly, numerous engagements around those LEO application spaces. I think Lunar's getting really popular at the moment. So a good number of our customers are looking at lunar navigation in different ways. There's some good, I'd say, space agency-backed programs right now to look at putting infrastructure around the moon, on the moon, and utilizing bandwidth from the Earth to the moon. Programs like Lunar Nav and Moonlight, for example, are really, really interesting because we're starting to see the potential fusion of communication systems and PNT systems for the first time at scale. Now, that it's a really interesting area because and why we feel that PNTX is really a key enabler for simulation in that space. One example would be that with Lunar, we're potentially starting to look at different types of radio signal in different radio bands. For example, moving from a traditional GNSS satellite system in L band to a lunar navigation system, potentially in S band. We're looking potentially at if the communication side of this starts to get more gravitas, then we could be up at much higher bands. So having a simulation capability that has flexible radio technology, flexible signal generation technology is going to be key, because industry is going through quite an experimentation phase at the moment in things like Lunar. I don't think anybody can say how it will predominantly end up. Will it be all consolidated, or will it be different into different groups? It's really important that we here at Spirent can actually deal with that and be flexible to allow our customers to experiment to get to those types of conclusion. So yeah, Lunar is a very interesting application area, because a lot of the physics that we apply for navigation to Earth in the satellite area, they have to be modified for lunar type navigation.
Oh,
Gravity, the
yeah.
lack of atmosphere for most of the part, it's all changing. So we're really excited to actually see how this all works out. And the final one I would say, Evan, is we're obviously keeping a close eye on things like terrestrial based navigation systems as well. A lot of these are in pursuit of again, resilience in PNT. If we can actually utilize more signals, not just from space but from the Earth as well, and terrestrial, then all the good, because it adds more robustness to PNT systems.
Wow, sounds like science fiction realized. Amazing. So PNT X is very interesting platforms, tons of features, hundreds of capabilities. Care to highlight a few that are top of mind that are really interesting?
Yeah, I would pick two. I think one has already been forementioned, is this 3D modeling capability we're finding is becoming very important to our customers, because simulation is fantastic in terms of being able to have something repeatable, controllable to utilize in the lab to devices under test, or PNT devices under test. The real kind of key, though, is to be able to make it real as possible. So realism for us is vital. We want our customers to have the confidence that they can have as much of the outside world, the outside world that they operate within with their PNT systems, and be able to bring that into the lab. So being able to control and simulate the outside world with more realism, it's going to become more and more important moving forward. And we've taken a massive step forward on that with PNTX. So I think that's the first one, that whole 3D world modeling that we can do for both urban and mountainous, any type of environment. We can utilize that 3D environment. The second point I would make is that when we start to look at things like the threats, the jamming signals, the interference signals, we find our customers want to be able to go out into the world and capture those. So they might go out into a city or an environment and actually capture real world signals that threaten PNT. Well, we have a capability now to take real world signals that have been captured and actually now put those into our simulator and manipulate those signals. So we start with a real world baseline and be able to then make that signal, for example, move. So have all the qualities of if you have a jammer that you've captured, a jamming signal that you've captured in the field, we can now take that jamming signal, put it into the simulator and make it a moving jammer. Because that could be real, So say you might have somebody in a city which has got a plug-in jammer from a cigarette lighter, which you shouldn't have, but people do, unfortunately, and model what is it like if that jammer was moving around the city? What would that mean to me operating my PNT device with this jammer moving around? So I can't, as that jammer might move around behind buildings and stuff, it would be obscured and then it would become visible. Things like that are becoming more important to simulate within the lab. And having that capability within our PNTX simulator is really important for so many types of industries, because again, it comes back to that same word. It's becoming more real. Realism, however we call it, that's what we want to get to.
Fantastic. I guess final question here, looking forward, short term, long term, where do you see the future of PNT headed, and how does PNTX fit in the picture?
Yeah, we were just talking about it this last couple of weeks, and it feels over the last 2 to 3 years, PNT in general has just accelerated in terms of the types of PNT signal that are becoming more viable, the number of threats to PNT, and what we see and what the public read about in the press, that becoming more real. Both adding up to this really complex environment. PNT is becoming more complex. We're becoming more dependent on it. If we think of all these different industries that continue to strive for levels of autonomy, so much of our infrastructure is dependent on it, particularly the timing piece of PNT. I just think that will continue to develop forward. And I can see more and more experimentation of different types of PNT signaling in space, PNT signals on the ground, different types of sensors in terms of what's going on in the silicon world. We've got some really advanced programs in terms of improving inertial-based systems. I think it's going to be a really interesting 5 years. If I think of a 5-year window, I think we're going to see lots and lots of experimentation, investment, and ambition to make PNT more available, integral, and reliable. And again, that's been part of what PNTX has been about. We are really trying to look over the horizon on this and making sure that what we are putting in place has that capability to flex and mold and change as we anticipate the next phase of PNT activity. And anticipate is the key word, because it's no point having a simulator after the event. We want to help customers before they get to those conclusions, and that's what PNTX is about. I think in terms of the technology for us as well, we've made sure that we are putting in place the most modular technology possible. I've called out, when I talk about Lunar, I'm talking about this different types of radio bands that need to be adopted. Well, if I then think about some of these really complex jamming and spoofing signals and producing lots and lots of them at the same time, well, what we've done in PNTX is we've started to fuse together different types of technologies to produce those types of signals. In our previous simulators, we had some very good traditional technology that is bang on for the job that it needs to do. And we continue to take that type of technology forward with us. But with PNTX, when we're starting to see the amount of new signals, the diversity of them, we are fusing in new technologies to be able to blend and make sure that we produce and simulate these new types of signals in the most effective and reliable and real way. And that's going to continue. That's what that PNTX architecture allows us to do, is to mold, anticipate, and implement before our customers get to their conclusions.
Wonderful. Well, keep up the amazing work. Really important for ourselves and the industry, and onwards and upwards. Thanks so much, Adam, for joining and sharing a bit of insight into the mission.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise, and thanks everyone for watching and listening, and follow Spirent on all the social channels. They put out some really incredible and educational content. Thanks, everyone.